Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 48th Annual Common Ground Country Fair. I'm Sarah Alexander. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. We were formed in 1971, and we work year-round to transform our food system by supporting our farmers, empowering people to grow their own food and feed their communities, and advocating for an organic future. We encourage you to visit the MOFGA tent right over here to learn more, and we're also excited to share that MOFGA and the fair are entirely powered by the sun. We have a 102 kilowatt solar array on the grounds here, and it was installed in 2017 by Revision Energy. MOFGA's campus is 300 acres situated in unceded Wabanaki homelands. MOFGA is working throughout the year to build relationships with Wabanaki communities, partner on food sovereignty projects, and advocate for Wabanaki tribal sovereignty. We encourage everybody to visit the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance tent, which is right over here on the Commons, and learn more about Wabanaki culture and support our Wabanaki artisans. So I'm really excited today to introduce our keynote speaker, Annie Watson. Annie is a mother, business owner, advocate, and organic dairy farmer. Not originally a Mainer, she moved to the state she now calls home in July of 2005 after graduating from Brown University. It was in September of that same year that her life changed after going on a date to chop corn with a local dairy farmer she met while tending bar. 8 years later, she and that same dairy farmer, Mike, now her husband, began dairying together with the purchase of Sheepscot Valley Farm in Whitefield, Maine. Their farm, family, and Annie's dedication to the dairy industry have only grown since. Together, they milk 75 cows and are members of the CROPP Cooperative. Annie currently serves as the president of the Maine Dairy Industry Association and is on the board of directors right here at MOFGA, the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. She's also a director of the Northeast Organic Family Farm Partnership. As a first-generation dairy farmer, she brings a fresh perspective to an industry rooted in generational knowledge. Annie is a strong advocate for organic and local food systems and their interdependence with our rural communities. She's a proven leader with strong advocacy skills, and her ability to connect people is something in which she takes great pride. Annie and Mike live on their farm in Whitefield with their 3 young sons, Oliver, Henry, and Guthrie, their herd of organic Holsteins, and a very small farm dog. Drawing from experiences as a first-generation dairy farmer and her own non-farm beginnings, in her keynote address today, Annie will discuss how finding community where she didn't expect it inspired her to become an outspoken advocate for the dairy industry, and why dairy landscapes we're losing are of importance to us all. Please join me in welcoming Annie to the stage.
Good morning. Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction. I am sincerely humbled to be here on the stage speaking to you all today. The young woman who joined the MOFGA board 9 years ago could never have imagined this scenario, but I'll get to that in a bit. Thank you all for coming to the fair today. To all the eaters, farmers, and gardeners, to the many past, present, and even some future farmers and gardeners, thank you for supporting this incredible event that so many people spend so much time and energy to produce. While there are many things that make MOFGA such a special organization, the Common Ground Fair is certainly one of the most spectacular. While I stand here today as a proud and to many recognizable fixture in Maine's dairy farming community, my path into farming was not expected. In fact, I think many of my family members are still scratching their heads when they think about me shoveling manure or squeezing teats during morning chores. You see, I was not born and raised on a farm. In fact, I spent my formative years in the suburbs outside of New York City, attended prep school outside of Boston, followed by 4 years at Brown University, where I graduated with my BA, prepared for a life in the arts, very much not on the farm, before my life pivoted into farming. In September of 2005, I went on a date with a dairy farmer. I was 22, a recent college graduate, spending the summer in Maine, trying to decide if I was moving to New York or Los Angeles to start my career in the theater. This farmer, a ruggedly handsome guy with a quick wit and a sharp tongue, came into the restaurant where I was tending bar, preparing for my life in the theater after all, and managed to talk me into coming out to his farm in Lincolnville the next day to chop corn. I agreed, having no idea what cutting corn, as I referred to it, even was. Little did I know how that experience would change my life. I drove from Camden, where I spent summers visiting my grandmother, out to Lincolnville Center to chop corn. I panicked that morning, having no idea what type of shoes one wore to take on such a task, and I hoped that I'd chosen correctly, settling on sensible sneakers. Upon arriving at the farm, an overwhelmingly large green tractor roared into the driveway, and the farmer jumped out, with a little boy in tow, the neighbor down the road who enjoyed riding with him. He asked me to wait as he drove him home. The little boy looked at me with a scowl, clearly disappointed I had interrupted his afternoon's enjoyment. When the farmer returned, he jumped back into the behemoth of a tractor and motioned for me to join him. I figured he only lived once, and climbed up on into the cab, wedging myself onto the armrest. It was not very graceful. We drove through the residential downtown of Lincolnville Center until we reached a turn just out of the village, and pulled onto a tree-lined gravel road and out into a giant field of corn. It was so hidden among the trees, I never would have guessed it was even there. This is the tremendous thing about the farming landscape in our beautiful state. It's often hidden among the trees. We spent the afternoon repeating the same few tasks, chopping entire corn stalks into a large wagon, dumping the chopped corn into a dump truck, driving the truck back to the farm, and augering the corn into a giant tube of plastic, a bag called an ag bag, to ferment, and starting the whole process over again. It was like nothing I'd ever seen in my life. All the while, the farmer and I talked about food, about our families, and about farming. He described to me what it meant to him to be a dairy farmer in Maine. By the end of the day, I felt like I didn't ever want to leave. As you might have guessed it, I didn't ever leave. That first date was September 18th, 2005, 19 years ago almost to the day. I can say today without hesitation I wouldn't take that day back for anything. The farmer, Mike Moody, my husband of 12 years, sold that herd of cows in Lincolnville shortly after we met in 2005. It was a decision that I now understand must have been existential for him at the time. He'd farmed on his own for 10 years without missing a single milking. That is equivalent to 7,300 milkings. He was ready for a day off. He did get that day off, and on our days off together, our favorite pastime was to ride around the countryside looking at the farm landscape of Maine. Mike is very much a history buff, and he would regale me with the stories of the farms that once made up the rural community of the Mid-Coast. Some were stories he knew firsthand from his childhood and adulthood working with his grandmother and father on their farm in Lincolnville. Many were stories that had been passed down from generations before. Stories of the chicken industry in Maine, how it changed literally overnight in the 80s, leaving some brand new barns empty, never to see a chicken set foot in them. Or stories of his great-grandmother's family milking cows in Lincolnville and delivering the milk to Belfast by horse and sleigh in the winter, all to get to the rail train so it could be transported to Boston. So many stories of lost landscapes, farms long gone, but also stories of land where farming was still central, barns still full of life. Throughout our travels on these back roads of Waldo, Knox, and Lincoln counties, one theme remained constant. The land and agricultural production was a vibrant part of these rural communities. And when dairy farms are no longer a part of the fabric of the landscape, that loss was palpable. These rides were very meaningful to us and spurred a much more in-depth conversation about the future of the food system in Maine and how our future family might play a part in it. In 2013, after much deliberation and planning, we made the decision to get back into dairy farming together. Farming was in Mike's blood. Some say it's like a disease, and it can be contagious. At that time, the organic dairy market was very strong, and after crunching the numbers, we constructed a business plan that proved, on paper at least, that we could make a decent living farming organically. In our travels throughout the countryside, we had connected with a farmer who was retiring and very interested in keeping the family farm as a dairy. We were incredibly fortunate to have access to some initial capital to put some money down on their organic dairy farm in Whitefield. And the farmer and his wife were willing and able to owner finance the remainder for us. On the morning of May 1st, 2013, we met at our lawyer's office in Camden to close on the farm, drove a U-Haul out there that afternoon, and milked our cows that evening. Then the gutter cleaner broke, and we both thought, oh no, what have we done? Eventually, we got rid of that gutter cleaner and changed the milking systems entirely. In fact, we've made several major infrastructure investments to improve the comfort of our animals and the efficiency of all of our systems. This has meant years of business and financial planning, as well as years of multitasking the ever-present day-to-day realities of the farm with major construction projects. To say farmers often wear many hats is an understatement. We've also added 3 children to our family, if we're going to talk about multitasking. Our boys are 9, 7, and 4, and while they're all busy and try to be helpful on the farm, the added pressure of farming while parenting has been an ever-present stressor as well as a joyful experience. Honestly, I could probably talk for hours about the pressures of farming while parenting, but that's a subject for another day. In the 11 years we've owned and operated Sheepscot Valley Farm, we've seen the dairy markets change, the players in the industry change, and the landscape around us change. This change has included the decline in our dairy farm numbers from 304 in 2013 down to just 141 today. 51 of these farms are organic dairy farms. Maine is incredibly unique in that 30% of our total dairy farms are organic. We don't represent a tremendous amount of the milk supply, but we cover a lot of ground with our 51 farms, literally. Our land base is critical to our organic dairy farms. For our organic certification requirements, all of our animals are required to maintain a minimum of 30% dry matter intake for at least 120 days. What this means in layman's terms is that for 120 days, our cows need to feed themselves at least 30% of their diet. To some, this might seem like an easy task. Okay, just let your cows go eat some grass. But in reality, this requirement involves an intricate system of fencing for pastures, some of which is moved daily, all to ensure our animals are getting access to the most nutrient-dense mixture of grasses and legumes, which, when added to a ration of organic feed like grain, provides the best quality milk. In the off-season, when the grass is taking its well-deserved rest, we rely on feed that we've put up all summer to sustain our cows. The hope is that we've put up good quality feed that will continue to provide our animals all the necessary nutrients to keep up their body condition and health, all while continuing to produce the healthy milk we all love to consume in the glass, as well as in our other favorite dairy products. We like to say cows are magical creatures. They turn grass into milk. Married into this bovine food system on our farms is a mix of constant upkeep and maintenance on all the surrounding systems that support our animals. The equipment we use to make our feed and clean our barns, the equipment we use to milk the cows, the buildings where our animals spend the winter, the barnyard where so much action happens on any given day, all of it requires constant attention. While the winter months are slower pace on a dairy farm, there's always something to do and money to be spent, even after the present milking chores. Where to manage. Manure, one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. Something that is joked about, and to those not used to it, often considered a nuisance, in all reality is one of our most valuable resources on our farms. All of the organic manure on our dairy farms, all of the organic manure our dairy farms produce goes right back out onto our land and into our soil. Either the cows distribute their manure themselves when they graze on pasture, or we empty our manure storage systems, which on our farm are both a manure pit and a composting bedded pack barn, using manure spreading equipment. The application of our organic manure helps our soil health, or the ability for the living soil ecosystem to perform important functions, such as cycle nutrients and storing and purifying water, which in turn helps the grass grow, and more. This ecosystem is made up of billions of microorganisms that support the soil by doing things like breaking down materials so that its nutrients become part of the soil. Adding organic manure can provide a boost of material that can be incorporated into the soil's organic matter, ultimately providing a stronger foundation for more microbial activity and nutrient cycling. Because cows on our organic dairy farms consume forage feeds cultivated on soils that are fertilized with manure and compost rather than manufactured fertilizers, research has shown this organic management may significantly affect how easily nutrients are converted in soil into forms readily taken up by crops. The health of our soil is directly connected to the health of our planet. As organic dairy farmers, we are doing our part to use systems that currently exist, as well as new and innovative practices in order to protect and enhance soil health, contributing to sustainability and biodiversity. It's our goal as farmers to make the entire system better, starting with the soil. As I said earlier, when I began farming in 2013, we had a total of 304 dairy farms in Maine, and today we are down to just 141. Many acres in our state that were once open fields and grazed pasture lands are now overgrown due to lack of management. The land here in Maine is some of the oldest farmland in this country. It was this soil that grew the crops that helped feed the birth of our nation. Our soil is a part of the very fabric of this country. But the soil needs to be worked and tended. Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations warned 90% of the Earth's topsoil will be at risk by 2050. According to Regenerate America, the majority of U.S. soils are extremely degraded, with topsoil loss occurring at a rate of 4.6 tons per acre per year on agricultural land. This is a major contributing factor to our climate, water, and health crisis. In Maine, we have approximately 40,000 acres in organic production. Over 19,000 of those acres are managed by organic dairy farms. Fewer than 60 farms. Think about that. Only 60 farms, managing 19,000 acres, using organic systems of management. And we are at risk of losing these farms every day. Increases in almost every aspect of our production over the last several years, in addition to a basically stagnant pay price from the two wholesale organic milk buyers in the state, have caused many organic dairy farmers to ask themselves very difficult questions about the future of their farms. Should they stay in business? How much longer can they continue to operate with a milk price under the current cost of production? Maybe we should just sell the cows and do something else. This is, after all, one of the most exhausting jobs a person can have. To say this would be a devastating blow to our agricultural community is an understatement. When a dairy farm goes out of business, it is rare that it ever comes back. Large swaths of land are often left fallow, and the entire rural community surrounding the farm can feel the loss. These farms contribute to our communities in ways far beyond the farm's property lines. Dairy farms are the backbone of our agricultural infrastructure. We support not just the dairy processors and dairy businesses, but the feed companies, equipment dealers, local food companies, repair shops, hardware stores, our local convenience stores, general stores, trucking companies, veterinarians, seed companies, and all the micro businesses in between that our entire farming community depends on, not just the dairy community. What would Maine look like without our dairy farms? What would New England look like? For years, our region has been losing dairy farms. I believe it's more than just an issue of short-term market conditions, but part of a much larger question of Maine's resiliency. Some might conclude that this is just an expected casualty with changes in dairy consumption, but the reality is that dairy consumption in the U.S. is up year over year. While the population drinks less fluid milk, Americans love our cheese, ice cream, yogurt, and butter. We have a U.S. dairy industry that has prioritized inexpensive milk over everything, over regional independence, over environmental sustainability, over responsible government subsidies, over understandable pricing, over local buying options, over everything. This mindset has led to the industrialization of dairy. This industrialization reached largely unrecognizable farms with massive operations of tens of thousands of cows. This is not the dairy of New England, but industrial dairy that ships milk into our region from as far away as Texas and Colorado. The reality of dairy in New England is not about winning a low-cost goods race to the bottom. It's about ensuring our region has economic resilience and independence as climate change persists and worrisome consolidation forces press our national agenda. If anything, the COVID-19 pandemic exposed us all to the fragility of our nation's food system. We cannot be dependent on faraway industrial dairy. It matters where your dairy comes from. It matters that our dairy farms are supported in our communities as their trust and knowledge of the land in Maine are irreplaceable. When I joined the board of MOFGA in 2015, I was a young mother, pregnant with my second child, still a beginning farmer. The only farming experience I had under my belt had been on our own organic dairy farm, and I had even less experience on nonprofit boards. There was so much I didn't know. I did know, however, that MOFGA needed more voices of dairy farmers, and when I was asked to serve, it was almost an immediate yes. It was as a MOFGA board member that I learned to listen more than I spoke. Granted, it might have been out of intimidation to start. The board in 2015 was made up of a group of very passionate individuals, many of whom had been on the board for a number of years. But listening gave me a chance to learn. I was able to learn about the organization from the inside, to learn about my fellow board members, about the challenges of working as a group toward a common goal, about the frustrations. In turn, I found myself growing and learning about my own reasons for being engaged. I grew in my understanding of the philosophy of organics and my passion for our system of management. I came to understand the importance of speaking up when there is something of value to say. And when you don't spend a great deal of time speaking in meetings, people tend to listen when you do. This lesson has been the most impactful in my own advocacy efforts, the power of listening. Most people just want to be heard. As farmers, especially dairy farmers, it can often feel like we are alone on an island, screaming into the wind. Listening to farmers tell the stories of their farms, their families, talk about their frustrations, their joys, hear their bad jokes. All of it has made an impact on my life as a farmer, as a person, and as a dairy advocate. Today, I serve as president of the Maine Dairy Industry Association, the trade organization representing all the dairies in the state of Maine. While I know I am the first woman to hold the position, I am also the first organic dairy farmer to serve in the role, which says a great deal about our dairy community here in Maine. We have more in common than we do that separates us. And in spite of the immense stress and worry, the financial concern and physical demands of this job, we all have hope in common. In spite of waking up every day, 365 days a year, and ensuring our cows are milked and cared for, we remain hopeful that there are better days ahead. We hope that the next season's crops might be better. We maintain hope in the innovative techniques we are researching on our own farms with the help of motivated service providers. We believe there are ways we can become far more adaptable in the face of shifting weather patterns, and that we as dairy farmers can be an integral component of a more climate resilient Maine, that we are part of the climate solution. Mike and I don't get the chance to drive around the countryside looking and talking about the farm landscapes as often anymore, though these days it's usually on a tractor or in a hay truck. In fact, we don't really have days off, but sitting on our porch, looking out over the tended fields of the Sheepscot Valley and the pastures our cows are grazing, as our kids race around the barnyard, hooting and hollering, I can't help but be grateful for the life and the landscape that we have found. Thank you.